Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Ma ba'd, carrying on from where we left off last week, where we were looking at the concept of zuhd and what Islam wants from us in our attachment to the dunya. Now, before going into today's chapter, it overlaps on several points, even same hadith sometimes. But one thing that the ulama say is that even before the Prophet ﷺ came, different cultures and different empires and different regions had good in them. It wasn't as if people were vile all around the whole world. Yes, they had the darkness of Jahiliyyah and dhulm and shirk. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتِمَّ مَكَارِمَ. He said utimma, to complete. What we can gain from that wording from the Prophet ﷺ is that there was goodness in akhlaq before he came. And if we look at the wording that the Prophet ﷺ uses, it's very, very specific, because even in the culture that we're living in right now, undoubtedly people can't deny that in the West there is a lot of goodness from non-Muslims. You know, they're letting us practice our religion, and we're having talks here, and we are, openly calling towards Islam, and there's a lot of goodness in lots of different cultures. However, it's not complete. And from these chapters we can understand what completes Islam. Because this chapter title here, a person might look at it and think it's a bit strange. I mean, even us as Westerners might read this chapter title and think, the virtue of hunger. How can hunger be virtuous? How does that make sense? But in the Islamic arena of akhlaq, this is what elevates a person. The roughness of life. How can that be possible? Now you can see, you can get the most well-mannered person living in the society that we're living in here today, but they might not be able to relate to this. Hunger is a aib. Hunger is, a deficiency. Hunger is actually a sign that you are not doing something right in your life, whether it's in your own economics, whether it's in your education, whether it's in your, judicial system, in your society. There's something wrong with you if you are hungry. There's something wrong with you if your life is rough. There's something wrong with you if you are not happy with a little. You should be seeking to get higher and higher and richer. That's what makes akhlaq for us. That's what makes you a better person. There should be something that makes you happy, and you should be exploring that. And now what they're doing is these ideas of desires has been put into the concept of human rights and what makes a human being. We don't really want to get into that, but these are some of the things that Muslims are now feeling, that their identity is in crisis. Either they can't be a Muslim living in the West, or they have to sacrifice what they think is Islam to live in the West, or there is some kind of a problem. LGBT, all of these things is one of those examples where desires has been put into human values. It's become a human right. But our concept of what is akhlaq is much more broader. And the reason for that goes back to last week's lesson, is the purpose of life. If we can understand our purpose of life, then we can understand the concept of zuhd. If we can understand our purpose of life, then we can understand why being hungry is virtuous, why having a rough life is something which is actually going to elevate you, why you should be happy with a little because you are only passing through, why desires shouldn't be the reason why you live. And a person might turn around and say, these I disagree with, and I think the complete opposite. And the reason why is because when people become hungry, when people have a rough life, when people are happy with little, you are confining them, and you are reducing their level of their potential. And when you tell people to leave their desires, you're reducing the level of arts, you're reducing the level of theatre, you're reducing the level of entertainment, you're reducing the level of people having joy. But the counter argument to that, now we can say, is okay, well, in theory that is very nice, that is very good. And it's a misconception for people to think that Islam doesn't want you to have these things, or the opposite of these things. Islam wants you to eat, Islam wants you to have a pleasant life, Islam wants you to have a lot if it's possible, and Allah wants you to have your desires. But all of that, there's 2 points, and answering that doubt that I'm going to mention now, is that, number one, Islam teaches us that we are an ummah of responsibility. It's not about hunger, it's not about the roughness of life, it's not about being content with little, it's not about desires. All of this revolves around us being responsible. That's how we can understand the concept of zuhd. That's how we're going to understand today's chapter. Responsibility is very, very important. And the second point is that, okay, we can have a clash of aqeedah, because aqeedah happens around the table. This is my aqeedah, that's your aqeedah. This person is a Shi'i, this person is a Sunni, this person is a Mulhid, this person is a Nasr. That happens around the table, and we can say, this is what I believe in. Fair enough. But now, how do we know who has the haqq? And even philosophers, kuffar philosophers have said this, and this is how they've even praised Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is because that theology, when it is practiced correctly, will show exactly which theology is good for mankind. So now you can have a theology and it makes perfect sense. A person could be a Marxist, a person could be whatever he is. But when you apply that into society, broader society, not just a small community, we're talking about a whole nation or even the whole globe, which is what we claim we have, you will find that every single culture and every single nation, every language-speaking people, and irrespective of where you come from or what time you live in, Islam is of betterment for mankind. And that's how, like I said, that's how we would understand the concept of zuhd, and that's what Islam emphasizes in understanding the concept of life. And when we can understand that, we can understand that we are a responsible nation. And when we act upon that responsibility, it will spread khair around the whole globe. It will put khair in us, in our families, in our societies, and around the whole globe. And that's how we know that we have the haqq. So now going into that, with that introduction now, we can hopefully have a better understanding of what the virtue of, or why there is a virtue in having hunger, why there is a virtue in having a roughness of life. Because what that does is, it creates a nation of responsibility, responsible adults, and it also creates a nation of those people who are not selfish, who are not arrogant, who are not boastful. If you look at Islam as a superpower, and if you look at other superpowers, not necessarily the one that we're living in right now, but any particular one, just proving that second point that I've just mentioned, that Islam, when it's applied, or any theology, when it's applied, you can see whether it's actually haqq or not, because of the betterment that it creates. Islam, there was an actual time where crime was so low that some of the ulama have said that between the time of the Prophet and X generation, we can even count the amount of times capital punishment had been executed. The data is so low, we can't even give you a statistic. And poverty, when it comes to poverty, when it comes to human rights and justices, the time of Umar ibn al-Aziz, radiallahu anh, or rahimahullah, poverty had been eradicated to the extent that they had no one to give zakat to. In Africa, there was no zakat. They had to find ways to spend zakat. So this is like I said, this is just an example of the introduction that we've had from the concept of understanding why you are here. Then we can understand what zuhd is. Then we can understand why Islam is the haqq, because it is part of our aqeedah to be selfless. It was part of our aqeedah to lead a simple life and not to be attached to this dunya, and to sacrifice what you want and from your own desires, and to channel that with responsibility. And that's why you can find a very broad chapter title here, but it encompasses these three things: responsibility, channeling, and sacrificing for the sake of the akhirah. And we have examples of this. And Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah, the very first ayah that he chose, the two ayat that he chooses to put in this chapter, فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ أَضَاءُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَاتَّبَعُوا الشَّهَوَاتِ. When they left the theology, when they left practicing the correct religion, the practice in society changed. And that's how we know that they deviated, because of the effect that it had on society. So now a person can say, I don't need to pray to be a good human being. Fair enough. That's a theology. That's a aqeedah aspect. That's a matter of belief and creed that you can have. Now, putting aside, let's challenge that and let's look at your dalil. Put that aside. Look at what this ayah says. They left the salah. What happens afterwards? As soon as they left the salah, واتبعوا الشهوات فسوف يلقون غيا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل صالحا فأولئك يدخلون الجنة ولا يظلمون فتيلا. Now the Shaykh say here, Imam Muhammad ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, this teaches us that when a person becomes distracted with the dunya, he will be led by his desires. And when this happens, all acts of aqeedah and piety and worship and uprightness, the idea, the model then changes into something else. And once that changes, it becomes difficult for a person to come back to what he had before, which is the default, which is his fitrah. It could be that he leaves the salah altogether, or it could become, lazy in performing the salawat, and then that will have an effect on him as an individual. For example, and I mentioned this in the khutbah also last week, if a person, now look, the Shaykh is saying here, even the conditions of salawat will be removed from his life. So for example, one of the conditions of salat is to have tahara, ghusl, wudu, and istinja, etc. Now, if a person is not going to pray, why would he need to make istinja? Why would he want to clean himself? What's the purpose? He's going to remain clean for what? Why would he ever make wudu? Does it make sense a person makes wudu and never prays? A person does ghusl properly, according to the shurut of a wajib ghusl, but he never prays. Covering the awrah, why would that become important to him? Why would facing the qibla? Why would having tranquility? Why would having hope and fear and submit? Why would dua and dhikr and Quran recitation? Why would all of these things that the salah is teaching us? This is just one aspect of the religion. Once that gets removed, why would he need to do any of those things? The responsibility is gone. The effects in society then will change, and then his attachment to the dunya will become solidified, and he will forget the akhirah. All of this leads to a conclusion mentioned in the ayah from Surah Maryam. There's another ayah that Imam Nawawi brings, فَخَرَجَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمٍ فِي زِينَتِهِ. Allah is talking about Qarun here, and Qarun was a person who had so much wealth that the keys for his own treasury and banks had to be carried by a group of people. That's how much keys and how much wealth that he had. That was just that part. It was just an aspect of his wealth. So, and the irony is that before, under the oppression of Fir'aun, he was actually a pious man. He was actually from the pious, from Bani Israel. When Fir'aun got drowned and they made hijrah to the other side, they inherited a lot of gold, which was left over from the sea, from Fir'aun. Others from the ulama have said that now Fir'aun had been left, he's been wiped out, a new government had been placed, and those people that were placed in Misr, in Egypt, gave the gold and the riches to Bani Israel. Whatever the case, they acquired a lot of gold, and Qarun developed that, and he became one of the wealthiest men that this world has ever seen. So this is again now going back to responsibility, attachment, and the effects on society, he then stopped practicing Islam altogether. And in actual fact, not only did he stop practicing Islam, he started to conspire against Musa. He started spreading rumors against Musa. And he actually once paid off a prostitute and said, listen, I'm going to give you some money. Go around telling people that you had a relationship with Musa. And this was how Allah finished Qarun in the end. And Allah caused for earth to swallow him up. And the Prophet ﷺ said that him and his people continue to be swallowed until Yawm al-Qiyamah, he is still being swallowed. May Allah protect us. Anyway, whilst the people of piety were amongst them, and he was, being arrogant, etc., the people of Haqq tried to give him da'wah. قال الذين يريدون حياة الدنيا يا ليت لنا مثل ما أوتي قارون إنه لذو حظ عظيم. Those people who are deceived by Qarun said, if only we had something like he had. He's become a very, very successful, wealthy person. Why? Again now, responsibility, connection to the dunya, and the change in society is affecting people. And we can see that. This is highly relevant today. But there was a group of people who remained firm. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ Those people who had ilm and ikhlas and iman, وَيْلَكُمْ Woe to you, how can you be deceived by this man? ثَوَابُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لِمَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَلَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الصَّابِرُونَ These 3 points are now mentioned as a refutation for those people who were deceived by Qarun. وَيْلَكُمْ ثَوَابُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ The akhirah is better, don't be deceived. Point number 1. لِمَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا The effects on society. Point number 2. وَلَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الصَّابِرُونَ Responsibility. You can't have sabr if you're not responsible. How would you have sabr otherwise? And an ayah that we recite, everyone, we teach our children this, Surah Takathur, ثُمَّ لَتُسَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ Allah concludes when He was talking about the scaling and the reckoning on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and every single one of us will be quizzed and asked and interrogated about the luxuries. Now, the ulama of tafsir from the Salaf kind of differed as to how to interpret this ayah. So when I was looking at the tafsir of this ayah, Imam Tabari brings so many different statements from the Salaf. So Mujahid said one thing, Qatada said something else, another said. So Mujahid, for example, he said that every single one of us will be questioned on Yawm al-Qiyamah about our desires and our pleasures. Qatada said, no. Every single one of us will be questioned about the favors that were given to them and the rights of Allah and how He spent those favors. You can see there's a slight contradiction here. But Imam al-Tabari, when he was concluding all of those statements, he said what's correct and the best way to understand all of this, and a good way to reconcile and summarize, is that people will be asked about everything they enjoyed and found pleasure in the dunya. Responsibility, attachment, and a social change. من كان يريد العاجلة أجلنا له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد. Whoever wants the hastened share of rewards, and that's the ajila here, that's what Allah calls the life of this dunya, the hastened rewards. Whoever wants those rewards right now, we'll give it to them. ثم جعلنا له جهنم يصلاها مذموما مدحورا. What happens to him in the akhirah? No responsibility, social change and attachment. And the many ayats Imam An-Nawawi says, the following are examples of the people that were closest to him on his daily habits. This is from me, by the way. I don't know if you've kind of noticed, but if there's a grey background, that's from the book. If there's a white background, that's from the explanation. So this should be in white. The following are examples of people who are closest to the Prophet ﷺ in his daily habits. And again, some of these narrations we've seen already. But the point that we learn from this is that the Prophet ﷺ lived with a lack of provision because he was connected, he was already there, he was connected to the akhirah. He was teaching us to be responsible, and he was teaching us that our aqeedah affects our society. Our aqeedah affects our society. He only took from the dunya as much that he needed to continue for his journey. So for example, Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Prophet ﷺ, his family never ate to their fill for 2 consecutive days until he died. Urwa, which is one of the students from Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that, Urwa asked Aisha and about the wealth of the Prophet ﷺ, and she said, "O son of my sister, by Allah, I used to see the new moon, then another new moon, and then another new moon. So 2, 3, 4 months have gone by, and there's not even a fire that's lit in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. No microwave hasn't worked, no toaster, no cooker, nothing's lit." So Urwa said, "My auntie, what did you eat then?" So she said, "We survived for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, dates and water." But it so happened that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had some Ansar neighbors, and they used to give milk, and they used to gift him with food and drink for us as a treat. Abu Hurairah also narrated that the Prophet ﷺ left this world without eating to his fill, and he was reminding those people as he passed by, as they were enjoying, a nice meal. Anas radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ never ate on a table. never ate sitting down like we eat on a dinner table. He never ate on a dinner table. Nor has he ever, now we're talking about Anas, who was there from the very beginning with the Prophet ﷺ. Never did he eat soft bread. And Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anh said, I have seen your Prophet ﷺ when he did not find enough of even the lowest quality of dates to fill his belly. Now, again, is it the point that we starve ourselves? Is it the point that we don't eat? Is it the point that we, don't thank Allah for His benefit? That's not the point. Again, going back to the point that we were talking about before, the Prophet especially came to teach us that we have to be responsible. So if Allah has given you a nice, good job, and I'm sure most of us are going to get that here, in a very good university, you have to be very responsible with that. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us. And now the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't have a 9 to 5. His wealth was coming in from booty, from gifts, from all of those things. He's responsible for those things. So if now I have given you a gift and you think, oh, mashallah, a nice steak, I'll just go ahead and enjoy this for myself. That's not how the Prophet ﷺ was. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he received something, he thought it as an amana upon himself, responsibility, to pass that on. Also, what we learn from him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the attachment to the akhirah. And also what we learn from him, that if he is our leader, and this is how he is behaving, what kind of an ummah is he going to leave behind? Because he knew that there was a lot of responsibility that was going to fall on his shoulders. And now if he was going to enjoy the luxuries of the dunya, then what's going to happen to us? But if our leader is like that and he is upright, then there is hope for salvation for this ummah. But what we can also learn from this is that the Prophet ﷺ and all the prophets and all the Anbiya, they were given things that no wealthy person can ever attain. Doesn't matter how rich you are, you could be the most richest person in the face of this dunya, you will never be able to get things that the Prophet ﷺ had in this dunya. He had miracles given to him. He had a connection with Allah. He had all of these things that money cannot buy. So they did have the good of the dunya. They did have things that people are envious of. But what did they use that for? They used that to gain something which is much more superior. And their material connection to the dunya remained very, very basic. That is despite them getting things like, how much would you pay to see Jannah? How much would you pay to see Jahannam? You can't put a figure on that. You can't. Even if you had all the wealth from the time of Adam until the last man, it wouldn't be enough. But this was given to the Prophet ﷺ how many times? Countless times. Isra, when he prayed the eclipse prayer. Sa'd ibn Sa'd 496 said that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ I had never seen the Prophet ﷺ have bread made out of fine flour throughout his life. The best of flour had never been prepared for the Prophet ﷺ since Allah, from the very beginning until when Allah took him. So he was asked, did you not have sieves at the time of the Prophet ﷺ? And he said, by Allah, the Messenger of Allah never saw a sieve. So now we're talking about flour. Obviously now we've got the luxury of having fine flour given to us. But at that time, you had to go through a process of having the flour made good for you. So the companion said, or the tabi'i said, that the Prophet ﷺ, how did they use their flour then? Was it just lumpy flour? What they used to do is they used to ground it against the floor, and then they used to blow away what was the lumpy bits, and then whatever remained, they used to make dough from that. That's how simple and basic their technology was. And the ayah that we quoted above from Surah At-Takathur actually has a context to it. Abu Hurairah narrated that the Messenger of Allah one night went out in the middle of the night, and he was starving, absolutely hungry. He meets Abu Bakr, and he says to Abu Bakr, what are you doing? He goes, Ya Rasulullah, I can't sleep, I'm so hungry. Rasulullah, he says, that's the exact same reason why I'm out. And then, as they carried on walking, they meet Umar. And then he says, what has made you leave your house at this time of night? And they said, Ya Rasulullah, we are so hungry, we can't sleep. The best of mankind, the best of this ummah and the Farouk are looking for a meal to eat. And they can't sleep because that's how hungry they are. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, by him in whose hands my soul is, what made you leave, made me leave also. So let's go and let's look for some food. And they were led towards the house of an Ansari man. And now the Ansar had, animals, and they had, things that was already there, settled as part of their wealth before the Prophet ﷺ came. So they must have had some kind of milk. They must have had some kind of agriculture. So when they came, the man wasn't there at that time of night, but his wife was there. And she saw the Messenger of Allah. She said, please come in. You're welcome at any time. So the Prophet ﷺ asked, where is the man that we are inquiring about? And she said, he's gone out to get us some fresh water. In the meantime, whilst the Prophet ﷺ is there, the man comes back and he sees the Messenger of Allah, and he sees Abu Bakr, and he sees Umar. And the man becomes happy. He says, Alhamdulillah, today there is no one who is more honorable as a host than I am. So then he went out and he brought back some fruit, and he brought back some dates, and he brought back anything which was ripe for them to eat. And he presented to the Messenger of Allah, and the Messenger of Allah, Abu Bakr and Umar, started eating. And then he took out a knife. And the Messenger of Allah said, what are you going to do with that knife? He goes, I'm going to slaughter a sheep. At this time of night for you, I'm going to slaughter a sheep, I'm going to cook it, and I'm going to bring it to you. And you're not going to leave my house until you have eaten a full meal that you're going to be pleased with, Ya Rasulullah. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, yes, get the fattest, get the nicest sheep. No. He said, if you have to do so, then get us the most basic sheep that you have, and make sure that sheep is not a milk providing sheep. What does that mean? That it's not going to harm the rest of the crop, it's not going to harm the child, and it's not going to harm the reproduction of his flock also. Because when milk becomes dried out, then that affects everyone else, and that affects the whole crop, and then the whole herd even, and everyone will die. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you have to, then do the most basic one that you are not going to be affected by. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want people's dunya. So the Prophet ﷺ had a sheep slaughtered for him, and they ate and they drank and they ate and they drank, and then they left. And the Prophet ﷺ said, by him in whose hand my soul is, you will certainly be questioned about this food on the day of judgment. And he said that to Abu Bakr, and he said that to Umar. He said, hunger is the reason why you came out, and you didn't return home until your bellies were full, and Allah is going to question you about this na'im on Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is na'im that the Prophet ﷺ was talking about. Extra fruit, extra drink, extra red meat, until they had their fill, and now they're going home. So what do we understand from this? Are we understanding from this that you can't go to Tesco and you can't go to Asda and stock up your shelves? Is that what we're understanding from this? This is not what we're understanding from it. What we understand from this is responsibility. What we understand from this is the connection to the Akhirah, and what we understand from this is the effect on social change. When a group of people are not sufficed with what Allah has provided for them, and they are meeting their obligations with that, and then they are asking for more, that's when you have لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. Allah's going to ask you about those luxuries that you felt you needed, which were on top of what Allah's already given to you, which was sufficient for you to do what was wajib. That makes sense? So if Allah has given you enough provisions for you to be happy and think, Alhamdulillah, I can pray my salawat, I can educate my children, I can be dutiful to my parents, I can lower my gaze, I can maintain my family life, I can do everything that is halal upon me and wajib upon me, and stay away from everything which was haram. And then you want to add on top of that, and you seek extra upon that, that's when it becomes an issue. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about here. And Islam gives importance for us to remember our akhirah. Hadith 498. Utbah ibn Ghazwan, the governor of Basra in his time, delivered a khutbah, and he praised Allah and he glorified Him, and then he said, Amma ba'd, verily the world, the life of this dunya, is giving you its news that it's about to leave you. The life of this dunya is telling us that she is going to leave us. not the other way around. She is going to leave us soon. And it's running swiftly towards its exit. Nothing is left out of it but a very little amount. She is leaving because there's not much left in her energy, in her resources. Similar to the remainder of a dish. If you have a dish, if you have a bowl, and you've had a really nice meal, often you might try and scrape the bottom and think, let me get some of that sauce, and let me get some of that gravy, let me try and finish it off completely. This is exactly the same thing. When it becomes scraping at the bottom, and that's what we are doing. And you are going to move on to an abode which no one has an end to. And you should proceed there with the good before you. For we have been informed by the Messenger of Allah ﷺ that this end and this abode has no limit. To the extent that if a stone is thrown now, it will land to the bottom of the hellfire in 70 years' time. It takes 70 years of travel. How long does it take for you to get from one side of the UK to the other side? By travelling. Let's take the fastest route of travel, which is probably by plane. You'll probably be there in 2 hours, 3 hours? This is 70 years. This is 70 years. How long does it take for us to get from here to the other side of the dunya? 12 hours. Let's say you can do the whole dunya in 24 hours. That's the whole dunya you've covered in 24 hours, one day. 70 years, the hellfire. 70 years of our time? No. In the akhirah, one day is different. One day is different. It's multiplied by 1,000. Some of the ulama have said 50,000. So let's multiply it then by 70 years, then multiply by the amount of days, etc. By Allah, it will be filled with men and jinn. 70 years will be filled with men and jinn, and this is a promise that Allah has given to us in the Quran. Do you find it strange? Do you find this kalam something new? Do you find that we haven't been informed about this, about the distance and the fact that it's going to be filled? Do you find it strange that there will be a day that the hellfire will be packed? He said, I was the seventh amongst the seven who the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had alongside him, and we had nothing to eat except leaves from a tree, radiyallahu anh. That's all we had to eat. And we ate those leaves to the extent that the inner layer of our mouths became injured. Ulcers and cracks, etc. And we had found a sheet which we tore into two, and we divided it between me and my companion Sa'd ibn Malik. We didn't have anything to wear. We had one garment and we had to put it in half so that our aura would be covered. Today, there is none amongst us who has not been given as a governor of the city. And I was remembering, he is the governor and he used to be the companion. And I seek refuge with Allah that I should consider myself great while I'm insignificant in front of Allah. Responsibility, going back to the akhirah, and the social. He's talking about the social change. He's talking about that the aqeedah is changing even at the time of the tabi'een. Abu Musa al-Ashri radiallahu anhu narrated that Aisha radiallahu anha showed us a sheet, and it was very minimal, and she said this is what the Prophet ﷺ was wearing when he died. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, he said, by Allah, I am the first from the Arabs who shot an arrow for the sake of Allah. And we fought alongside the Messenger of Allah ﷺ at a time when we could only have leaves to eat. They were eating basically grass. To the extent that our stool resembled the stool of sheep. Human stool resembled the stool of sheep. So a person might think now, okay, well, these were the companions and it was a different generation. We can't do that now. It's difficult. I mean, we've got phones. They couldn't even imagine of having something like that. Again, it's not about what you own. It's about your attitude and your mentality towards that thing. And the only way that you can remember and be attached to the akhirah is if you renew your iman. And one of the biggest things that the Prophet ﷺ used to teach us, despite only eating water and dates for a period of 3-4 months, he himself used to supplicate to Allah, and he used to say, "Oh Allah, make the provisions of the family of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sufficient. Bless us in it. Give us what we need to fulfill what we need to fulfill, and bless us in it." Dua is a key for us to be satisfied. The Prophet ﷺ survived on dates and water, but the main thing is about the blessing and your connection to the akhirah. Having extra for the Prophet ﷺ was only a treat, and it was only sometimes given as a miracle for him. And the proof of that, and before we do 502, let's remind ourselves of who Abu Hurairah is. 503, Abu Hurairah said that I used to be so hungry, and he came from a very wealthy background. He sacrificed that all for the sake of Allah. He was very, very hungry, and he used to get so hungry, as in he used to be supported by his mother, and his mother cut off everything because of his Islam. I used to become so hungry that I used to be in the Haram, Masjid al-Nabawi, and you have to remember it was very small at that time, to the extent that people who used to pass by used to think I'm crazy, the way I was acting. And sometimes I was so hungry I used to fall unconscious. Let's take another hadith before we take this incident here. That the Prophet ﷺ had a group of people who used to stay at the back of the masjid, and they were known as Ashab al-Suffa, and they were very, very poor. Some of them only had enough to cover their aura. Some of them even have enough to cover their aura, and we looked at that last week. Some of them, when they used to stand with the Prophet ﷺ in prayer, they used to collapse. They used to stand, they couldn't stand upright because they were so deprived. And when the Prophet ﷺ used to recite, they used to fall down because of the lack of attachment they had to this dunya and the lack of provisions. Anyway, there's an incident here, 502. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh said that I used to get so hungry, I used to press stones against my stomach to repel my hunger. One day I was sitting, and the Prophet ﷺ passed me by, and he was smiling. And I knew that something good was about to happen. So the Prophet ﷺ called me and he said, "I'm at your service, O Messenger of Allah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Come with me." So I came with him, and I went with him, and we came to his house. And the Prophet ﷺ went inside. So Abu Hurairah sought for permission to enter, and he allowed him to enter. And when he came inside, he found that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had a bowl, and it was filled with milk. So Abu Hurairah said, "Where did you get this from?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "It has been gifted to me from such and such person." So the Prophet ﷺ says to Abu Hurairah, "I want you to do me a favor with this bowl of milk." So Abu Hurairah says, "Of course, I don't mind, whatever you say." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Go," and obviously his house is annexed to the masjid, "go to the people of Sufa, just over there, and give them this bowl of milk as a gift from me." Now Abu Hurairah, you have to remember, a minute ago we just talked about his description. He used to fall unconscious, sometimes he couldn't stand straight. A part of him's dropped in his feeling, and he's thinking, this bowl of milk, he's just brought me into his house, I'm absolutely starving, and I've got this bowl of milk in front of me, and he's just told me I can't have any, I need to go give it to someone else. So he's walking with this bowl of milk, and he's thinking, had it not been for the Prophet ﷺ's command, I really would just like it just a little bit, but the Prophet ﷺ has commanded me. So we went there, and I saw the bowl of milk, and it wasn't a lot. And I thought, okay, if I give it to at least just one person, it's finished, and my chance is gone. There's a whole group of these people, and they've only got a little bit of milk. The Prophet ﷺ commanded to give it to one person. That person drank, and he drank as much as he wanted, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, keep passing it along, until everybody drank. And the Prophet ﷺ is now standing there with Abu Hurairah, and he says to Abu Hurairah, "It's just me and you now, isn't it?" And he goes, "Yes, it's just me and you." So the Prophet ﷺ says to him, "Ya Abu Har," and that was, a nice way of, talking to him, and he's smiling at him, and he knows what he wants. And he says, "At your service, O Messenger of Allah." And he says, "Drink." So now Abu Hurairah initially was thinking there's only a little bit of milk left. He drinks. So the Prophet ﷺ ushers to him again. He says, drink some more. To the extent that Abu Hurairah says, "By Allah, Messenger of Allah, I can't drink anymore." So then the Prophet ﷺ said, If you have had enough, then praise Allah and give me the remainder. This was a miracle given to Abu Hurairah from the hands of Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of the correct understanding that they had. Can you not be given miracles? Ahl Sunnah are complete consensus that me and you can get miracles today. It's not something that's been cut off from Allah. The Prophet ﷺ even had enemies, and he would give to those enemies in a way that those enemies could not understand why this man is behaving like this. And this is now going back to the introduction that we talked about. People's perception of success and failure is dunyawi. And when our ummah, if we can understand that from the Prophet ﷺ, we can gain some kind of khair and understand Tawheed exactly what it is. We can understand Sunnah exactly what it is. We can understand Islam exactly what it is. And we can make this deen prosper in ourselves, in our communities, and as a ummah. So now if you have an ardent enemy and you are kind towards him and you are showing generosity towards him and you're showing pardoning and you're showing these characteristics the Prophet ﷺ showed, and a lack of interest in the dunya, it had an astonishing effect for those people around the Prophet ﷺ. So now we had some people who wanted to harm the Prophet ﷺ and assassinate the Prophet ﷺ over and over again. And it's been narrated here by Aisha 504 that the Prophet ﷺ didn't pass away until his armor had been given as a mortgage to one of those people that possibly could have, created some kind of enmity towards the Prophet ﷺ using that. Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu reported the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave his armor away to a Jew at that time, and this is not all Jews, but that person may have been a Jew that had enmity towards the Messenger of Allah sallallahu in exchange for some barley and some fat. And with that, he used that to feed his family, which was obviously just a small amount of barley and fat. And with that, he fed 9 houses. And we've talked about this before. Some of the companions only had enough to cover their private parts. That's Hadith 506. And here we have a Hadith of the people of Suffah. And we've looked at Hadith 507 before also, that the mattress of the Prophet ﷺ was very, very thin and it's as if he was sleeping on the floor. It was made from tanned leather and it was stuffed with palm fibers, which is rough. They didn't complain, and this is a lesson for us because perhaps in it is a preparation for us all. Companion narrated here, Ibn Umar, that once we were sitting in the company of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when an Ansari man came in and he greeted the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as he was leaving, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O brother of the Ansar, how is my brother Sa'ad ibn Ubadah?" Sa'ad ibn Ubadah was the head of the Khazraj. So he replied, "Alhamdulillah, he's okay." So the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "We want to go and visit him. Is it a good time? Shall we go see him?" So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Let's go see him." And Ibn Umar is narrating here that we were about 10 of us, and neither of us had shoes, neither of us had caps, and neither of us had shirts. And we walked through the barren plain. Now we're walking on hot sand to go and visit our brother Sa'd ibn Ubadah. That's not easy, trust me, it's not easy at all. And his people made way, and when the Prophet ﷺ arrived, and they accompanied him to go and visit their brother in that state. Preparation. Not being content and the world being full of greed is a sign that the hour is close. Imran ibn Hussein, Hadith 509, narrated that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, "The best of all nations is my nation," or "the best of all generations is my generation, and then those that come after them, those that come after them. Then, as a sign of the times, they will be followed by those people who will make an oath and say, I'm speaking the truth, but in actual fact he's lying. And a person who is given a trust, but he will betray. And they will make vows, and they will not fulfill them. And guess what? A love for the dunya will prevail amongst them. Obesity and greed will become widespread. I ask you about Allah, is that not a description of what's happening right now? A person says something and he is a liar and he is believed. The tabloids, the media, the politicians, the celebrities, it's full of it, it's full of it. And the last bit is what we are concerned about here. Obesity, in its literal sense, has spread. And in its meaning, as the ulama have said, it's not an aib. It's not that you are weak in your iman if you are overweight. That's not the point. The point here is responsibility connected to the akhirah and the fact that there is going to be a social change. People will not be dependable and leave those who are responsible. The Prophet ﷺ narrated from his Lord, Hadith 5:10, O son of Adam, if you spend the wealth that you have as surplus beyond what you need for your obligations, it will be better for you than had you retained it. You will not be reprimanded for storing what is enough for your need. First of all, spend on those people who you are dependent on. So what we understand from that is what Allah has given to you, use that for your obligations. Anything that is beyond that, don't be connected to it. There's no harm, as we see in this hadith, there is no harm in you collecting, because this is praiseworthy. But what are you collecting for? Is there another goal which is higher and superior, or are you collecting for the sake of living in this dunya and indulging even more? So a person might say, well, I've got a nice job, I'm earning 20, 30, 40,000, I need only to spend 10,000, and I've got 30, 40,000 left. I can use a bit of sadaqah, but then I'll save a decent amount. What are you saving that for? Are you saving that so that there will be no fitna for your children afterwards? That is khair, that is good. Allah doesn't want you to sacrifice that. That's what we learn from this. First of all, spend on those who are your dependents. But are you using that so that you can buy a mansion and you can have the nicest of cars and the nicest of houses? If that is the case and you are connected to the dunya in that manner, then there is a problem. Whosoever begins the day feeling safe in his family and he's been given good health and he has enough provisions for the rest of the day, it is as if he has possessed the whole dunya and everything that contains. That is true richness. Being given, content and happy and giving thanks for it. Iman and being sufficed with what you have from the dunya is given to those people who have Iman because it is in order for them to keep their journey going for the akhirah. But those people who don't have Iman are given in the dunya because of what? So that they can indulge in this dunya even more and more and more. So you could be parallel with somebody else, same job, same salary, but Allah is providing for you, and that is going to be khair upon khair upon khair for you, because that is a vehicle for your akhirah. 5:12. Successful is the one who enters into the fold of Islam and is provided with sustenance which is sufficient for his day's needs, and Allah makes him content with it, and He bestows upon him with which is khair for him. Happiness is due to him and is bound upon the person who is guided to Islam and he's given provisions and he has sufficiency in it. Ibn Abbas also narrated, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ went to bed hungry for several successive nights, nor did his family or himself have any kind of dinner, and their bread was made from the most basic of barley. Sometimes they couldn't even stand straight, and we've looked at this hadith before, Fadala ibn Ubayd, who narrated that some of the companions used to fall down because they couldn't stand up. Miqdam ibn Mudkarib, 5:16, reported that I heard the Messenger of Allah say, no man fills a container which is worse than his stomach. A few morsels are sufficient for him to stand up so that he doesn't fall down when he is praying, so that he doesn't fall down when he is walking. A few morsels is sufficient. But Allah, I speak to somebody just today, he goes, I have 7 meals a day. 7 meals a day. The Prophet ﷺ said, a few morsels is sufficient for your day. Not 7 meals, 7 bites should be enough for your day. But if you need to have more, then leave a third for liquid, a third for solids, and a third for gas. Increasing in these things. Now, what we learn from this hadith particularly is that how can you measure your stomach? Can you measure your stomach? There's no yardstick to think, okay, well, I've got a meter that says, I've done a third now, and that's it. And I'm going on empty, so I need to top it up again. It doesn't work like that. What we learn from this hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us the concept of mubah. The concept of mubah. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, Shaitan will take you into the hellfire from one of 5 means. Either he will make you do kufr and shirk outright, and you will obey him in this. If that fails, he will make you fall into something which is a major sin. He will try and make you be addicted to that major sin, so that becomes your plan on your path towards the hellfire. If that doesn't work, what he will try and do is he will make you distracted from what is wajib. So you're not in riba and you're not in zina, but you will not pray either. How many of them are like that? So they are good people, but they won't pray. They won't do what is wajib upon them. Khair. If he can't make you fall in that, what he will make you do is he'll make you leave what is better. Now this is where the ummah is failing, these two last bits. Particularly those people who are practicing religion. There's no shirk and kufr. They've studied Kitab al-Tawhid over and over again. There's no major sins. Alhamdulillah, they're free from all of that. They're doing what is wajib. They're teaching for their parents, they're paying the zakah, they're performing the salat, and they're doing the fasting in Ramadan, etc. But now, we have a problem here, which is that they are not able to understand what is better. It's from the plots of shaitan, where it makes you think that sitting on Twitter, and even if you're just following the accounts of Tulab al-Ilm and Mashayikh, is better than you praying Qiyam al-Layl. It's from the plots of shaitan, which makes you think that I can sit here for hours and hours on YouTube or watching the TV, etc., than you studying the religion or reciting the Quran or something which is benefit. The plot of shaitan is he wants you to make you think that you're doing something good when there is actually something better that you could be doing. If he can't make you slip in that, he will get you in the mubah. Okay, I can go out, I can have a nice meal every Friday, and then we go for dessert, and then we can spend all night chatting. It's halal. Where's your dalil? It's halal. And put into this also, put another spanner in the works, let's do something which is haram, but they will say that it's halal. Nasheeds, shisha, free mixing, all of these kind of things. What we learn from this hadith is that when a person increases in his mubahat, he's fallen into the plots of shaitan. What that does, it creates negligence, and it creates the opposite of what we are trying to attain from this chapter, which is a detachment from this dunya and an attachment to the akhirah. A life of responsibility and not a life of irresponsibility. It's irresponsible if a person just spends all night indulging in mubahat, and then when it comes to Salat al-Fajr, he sleeps. That's irresponsible. Hence, he had no connection, the Prophet ﷺ, to food, not to his shield, not to anything, not even to his mattress, because he is teaching us a very, very important lesson. Don't be fooled by the plots, these 5 plots of shaitan. He accepted what came to him and he didn't seek what was not meant for him. Hadith 517, the Prophet ﷺ, has been narrated here. The companions of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentioned the life of this world before him. And he said, do you not hear? Did you not hear? Did you not hear? Simplicity is part of Iman. Ibn Rajab radiallahu anh said, rahimahullah said, the stronger the ruh, the stronger the Iman, the stronger the body. And the stronger the ruh, and the stronger the Iman, and the stronger the body, in actual fact, he becomes less materialistic. The weaker the Iman, the weaker the body, and the weaker the ruh, the more materialistic he becomes. It's like that. And you can't have it any other way. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu sent us on an expedition, and Abu Ubaidah was the head of that expedition. And what they went to do is to intercept a caravan of those people who had oppressed them years before. And he provided us with a bag of dates. And Abu Ubaidah, what he did, he sent out rations. He said, okay, you're going to get one today, one today, one today. And I've got the rest of the dates, and we'll see how much we need for the rest. So the sub-narrator asks, how can you survive on one date, or the rations that he gave you? So the companion said, we sucked on it like a baby. And we drank water that was sufficient for us to keep us going. And we beat off leaves with the help of our sticks, and then we drenched them with water and we ate them. We ate, eventually when the dates ran out, we ate water. We ate leaves after drenching them with water. And then we got to the seaside, and we were starving. And now some of the companions were saying, what we need to do is sacrifice our animals that we are riding upon. Some of the companions, Abu Ubaidah said, no, don't do that. How are we going to get back to Medina? Some of the companions, they didn't listen, so they started slaughtering the camels and they started eating those camels. That then ran out. Dates were run out, camels were run out, they're eating leaves. And it was from the karama of the Prophet ﷺ, or the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, a whale happened to get washed up on the beach. The companions enjoyed that for a number of days, to the extent that they went back to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and they told him what happened. The Prophet ﷺ said that this is an opening for you from Allah. And he asked, have you got any meat from whale meat? Because who's eating male meat in the middle of the desert? It's not possible. So they presented the Prophet ﷺ, and he ate from that whale meat. Asma bint Yazid, 519, reported that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, his sleeves reached his wrist. Now what's the point of that? Is there symbolism in that, or is that purely descriptive? For most of the ummah, it's purely descriptive. The Prophet ﷺ used to have an imamah, let's wear an imamah. He used to put henna in his beard, let's put henna in a beard. He used to put oil in his hair, let's put oil in the hair. It's purely descriptive, let's just imitate. What is the meaning of his sleeves meeting his wrists? It's exactly the point that we're getting here. Responsibility, he's covered his body. Attachment to the akhirah, so this wrist is covered. And I'm not seeking a new clothing every single day. That's not what I want. That's what I want in the akhirah. And what we learn from this is that the Prophet ﷺ didn't want extra from the dunya. He wanted from the dunya which was sufficient. What was covering his wrists. Jabir narrated in the Battle of Khandaq, they were starving, and there was another miracle that was given, that he brought a pot to the Prophet ﷺ. They were starving because now they're living in a sanctuary and there are rations and they are being starved from within. There's a whole army that's surrounding Medina. There's no trade coming in and out. They're starving. They've only got what was left and that right now. Jabir had some food. He brought it to the Messenger of Allah. He brought it to his house. The Prophet ﷺ said, bring the army. Everybody who is helping to dig this trench, bring them all. Jabir started getting worried. There's only one part that was meant for Rasulullah and his family, and now he's brought the whole army. The Prophet ﷺ said, come, the whole army come, bring your vessels and your pots with you. The hadith mentions here that every single person came into the house of the Prophet ﷺ, filled up their pots and went home and they ate to their full, and the pot that Jabir gave to him, the Prophet ﷺ returned to Jabir full, as he gave it. Is that a miracle that stops? No. Anas radiallahu anh narrated that Abu Talha, and we'll finish soon inshallah, there's only a couple of hadith. Where are we? Abu Talha said to Sulaym, now Abu Talha is married to Sulaym, that I noticed that the Prophet ﷺ is getting weak in his voice. Perhaps he's hungry. Have you got any food? She said, yes, we've got some food. We've got some barley, we've got X, Y, and Z. What we can do is we can prepare a meal. They were talking about how to invite the Messenger of Allah. So, khalas, I'm going to go call him. So he went to the masjid and he found the Prophet ﷺ sitting there amongst his companions. And he stood near the Messenger of Allah. And he said, come to the house of Abu Talha, the person that Abu Talha sent out. So he went and he's come back. And Abu Talha then says to Sulaym, the Messenger of Allah is about to arrive. Are you sure we've got enough food? She said, yes, don't worry about this. So then Abu Talha brought the Prophet ﷺ in and they sat down. And the Messenger of Allah said to Sulaym, bring forth what you have. Give us the food that you have prepared for us. Barakallahu fiki. So she brought out bread, and the Messenger of Allah broke the bread into pieces. And after Sulaym had squeezed out some clarified butter, some ghee that they had, and he made it into like a soup. And the Messenger of Allah recited over it. And he then said to Abu Talha, can you go and fetch as many people as you can find and bring them in? Abu Talha went out, he bought 10. And the Prophet ﷺ said, go and bring another 10. Bring another 10. Bring another 10. And everyone is eating to their fill as the Prophet ﷺ is calling them in. And the narrator said, more than 70 to 80 people ate on that day. What we learn from all of this is not just fancy stories. What we learn from this is that, again, reiterating the point, and we have here now 522, 523, richness is not the abundance of wealth. It's not about how we introduce this lesson. It's not about your connection to the dunya which makes you successful. Rather, it's self-sufficiency. What does that mean? Responsibility and a connection to the akhirah. And when your iman and aqidah is firm, you will see that changing in society. If yourself, if your family is not changing, that means your aqidah and your zuhd and your responsibility is not correct. There is a problem there. Maybe you're a weak father. Maybe you're not a good child to your parents. Maybe you're not a good sibling. There is a problem there because we're not taking responsibility correctly. We are too connected to the dunya, and that is affecting our aqidah, and that was affecting the fruit of how we are practicing that religion. 523, successful is the one who has entered into the fold of Islam and is provided and is given sufficiency in what he has been provided with, and Allah makes him content with what he has bestowed upon him until he meets him. Ask Allah to make this beneficial for us all and give us the firmness of iman and tawfiq to act upon what we have heard and what we learn in all of our durus. هذا والله أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. بارك الله فيك. Anybody got questions before we go for salat?
We don't have time, but I'll ask a question. Wallahi, Shaykh, it's very interesting. MashaAllah. Whenever I go over these hadith, Shaykh, I ask myself this question. Is it fair that we will be resurrected with the Sahaba, with the Prophet ﷺ in the same level of Jannah. And these guys, subhanAllah, you know, we've seen from the hadith what they ate, what they experienced. And we here living almost in Jannah, Shaykh. So sometimes I ask myself this question. I mean, what did we do for our deen, you know?
This is the thing. Now, are we going to be raised alongside the companions when we've got a lot more luxuries than they had? That's the question, isn't it? Now, if we understand our lecture, then we will understand the answer, which is that they had been given from the dunya, which was written for them, and we are going to be given from the dunya, which is written for us. What puts you into Jannah? Is it your rizq in the dunya, or is it your mentality? It's your zuhd. It's to realize why you have been created and to use what Allah has given you as a means in the dunya to attain your akhirah. You have to be responsible. You have to have that level of zuhd, and you have to have that aqeedah in yourself so that you can see it changing your life. If it's not changing your life, there's a problem. It changed their life, there was no problem. They were given very little because that was good for them, and it changed their life.
But I mean, Shaykh, the lifestyle that we live in, Shaykh, it doesn't seem that.
The lifestyle that we live in makes it seem as if we've got luxuries that they didn't have. Do you know that mobile phone usage is connected to mental disorder? Do you know that the fact that we've been thrown marketing time and time again, and I mean, this is a conspiracy, but you know, people are saying that governments are turning a blind eye to people, fast food chains, etc. They're marketing and they're marketing, so people eat and they eat and eat. What does that create? It creates heart disease and creates obesity and it creates all this kind of difficulty. Are we really in na'im? Or are we in adhab? Wallahi al-Azim, I will argue that we are in adhab. The reason why, because Allah, and this is factually now, Allah has chosen the best of His creation never to see any zaman like this at all. Not Isa, not Musa, not Ibrahim, not Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Jami'. Therefore, this is a fitna. Therefore, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to seek refuge from the zaman of Masih Dajjal. And undoubtedly we're living in that. And if we hold on to our religion like hot coals, what will you get? You get the reward of 50 of the companions, not because of their status, but because of what they used in the dunya to seek the akhirah. Allah give us tawfiq and take us in a way that He is happy with us.